So, Yasmin and I have both had our fair share of acne struggles. My personal journey with acne is probably lasted about almost 2 decades of my life. And I've been through it all. I've been through Accutane, antibiotics, taking a more holistic and root cause approach. And I guess my big question is, what causes one body to have acne versus another body? And is there a genetic component? So, for example, in my family, my brother, my sister, and myself have all dealt with acne. Now, I can look at another family or set of siblings who maybe ate similarly or live similarly, or maybe we're even living a more inflammatory lifestyle, but there's no manifestations of acne. So, in your experience, what have you seen are the causes of one body to have acne versus another?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it can be complex, but from what I've seen with working with a lot of people, there's definitely a genetic component, but not necessarily that it's like written in your genes, but there could be a genetic component where you're not able to convert something like beta carotene into the active form of vitamin A, which is retinol. And we all know about retinol being good for the skin. It's one of the first things we think of when we're putting things on topically is like retinol. And then retinol is really good for suppressing sebum, so extra oil glands. So if you're in with someone, and I think it's a good percentage of the population, like 40%, can't convert beta carotene into retinol very easily. So you're kind of chronically deficient. And that obviously can run in families if those genes are present in the family line, or maybe you have both parents who have that. So if you're not getting good retinol from your diet, so activated retinol, so that would be from like cod liver oil or beef liver, and you're only eating maybe a vegetarian diet, then you might not be getting the activated form of retinol. And we also used to get a lot of retinol from like grass fed meats and dairy products and butter. And again, a lot of our food supply is not grass fed anymore. So that would be one possible reason. I also think that there are genetic components. Well, the other one is like the MTHFR variation, where you're not converting those B vitamins into the active form either. So we know that's genetic. And then I think people manifest their inflammation in different ways. For example, some people get migraines every single cycle, and or cyclically, or just in life they get migraines. My daughter gets migraines, and then her dad and her grandma on her dad's side, they all get migraines. Like I don't, and no one on my family side does. So I think that some people manifest inflammation or imbalances in different ways, and it comes out in different ways. And so your particular genetic makeup manifests acne. So, and then obviously there's a huge like lifestyle component. But if you're saying everything is the same stress, same lifestyle, um, there's also things that might come up with like even the type of birth you had, if you were a C-section or you had a lot of antibiotics as a kid, and if that impacted your gut health. And so it's not something I dwell on a lot, because I really am focused on like, okay, where are we now? What can we change now? But sometimes there are clues in a family. If everyone has acne, like I do look at that vitamin A component or the MTHFR, the B vitamin variations, and see if we can optimize that and try to get you to the healthiest version of yourself, despite whatever genetics were passed down. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating actually, because we grew up vegetarian, and a lot of people in the South Asian community grow up the same way. They grow up vegetarian, and a lot of women that I know who are South Asian, they have things like PCOS or
Mm,
different forms of metabolic syndrome, and also with that comes acne. So it's fascinating that you said that you want to be having, and correct me if I'm wrong, more of the activated form of vitamin A or
hmm.
retinol. And
Yes.
so in that, you mentioned cod liver oil, you mentioned beef, different
Liver.
types
Yeah.
of grass
Hmm.
liver, grass-fed meats, and all those things were missing from my diet,
Mm, yeah.
right? So if somebody is listening to this who their daughter or their son or somebody in their life is vegetarian and struggling with acne, this could be something to consider, that their form of acne is maybe coming from these deficiencies.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think people are also very individual. I mean, a lot of people come to me after going vegan or vegetarian, and their acne got worse. And when they add meat back in, it gets better. But I also know other people who feel better eating vegetarian. So it's really an individual journey to see how your body thrives the most, and in what different seasons as well. I recommend more of like a paleo style, like back to kind of what how our ancestors would have maintained their health without modern supplements and without a lot of synthetic things. They would have taken, what's around them and nurtured their health that way. But again, that can look different across different cultures of what like our ancestors would have eaten. So it's kind of a journey to figure that out for yourself.
Absolutely.
I was that person, and I know, Kea, we always talk about acne, and it's actually something I'm still dealing with post birth control. I actually never had acne growing up, never did.
Mm.
I had a clear face that I took for granted and was on birth control, got off, and cystic acne galore. It's definitely significantly better, 3 years into my own journey. But what's so interesting about the way you approach it is actually, let me take a step back. I was the person that thought if you had dirty hands and touched my face, that's why I had acne. I bought every expensive skincare. I used to get facials once a week, which is crazy that I think about. Like, I tried all things topically because I was like, no, it must be this. I didn't even understand how acne could be a root cause issue. Obviously, now in the life stage I am, I'm a firm believer of this. So tell me more. If someone's listening, they're like, listen, Kristin, I
Mm-hmm.
don't even understand. What does that even mean? Like, root cause of acne? Like, what are some
Yeah.
of the pillars that you see with a lot of the clients that you work with?
Yeah. And I think your story is so like similar. I think everyone, when they initially get acne, and I started getting acne in my early 30s after a lot of stress in my life. So stress was definitely a component in mine. But when we start getting acne, we immediately like turn to, okay, I need to buy more expensive skincare, or I need to get facials, or you're doing all these surface things, and that's always something to look at because maybe your skincare is irritating your skin in some way. But for the vast majority of people that I work with, particularly when it's persistent, it's not going away in the first few months of changing things up. I've developed a sort of a framework or an idea of thinking about acne where to me it's a series of dominoes, and we have all these dominoes that fall down, and then acne is just the last domino. So you really can't focus on acne. It's a symptom of everything that's going on upstream, and if we keep trying to put back up this acne domino, it's just going to keep getting knocked over when we're not addressing the dominoes upstream. And what I mean by upstream is like, so hormones, we know hormones are related to acne because we can see that happening in teens and pregnancy and our cycles. We know hormones, but what is driving those hormonal imbalances? Usually that's something like gut health or toxicity, toxins in our environment, or it can be stress. And stress is probably, I don't just mean the stress that you're like, strung out, rushing around, but stress is probably the deepest root cause because when our nervous systems are in their survival mode or constantly going into survival mode, our body deprioritizes our hormone balance, our digestion, and our detox, which we know are key to clear skin. So our body puts those on the back burner. So the way I like to describe it is if you're doing the dishes and taking out the trash, just doing normal things around your house, and then you notice a part of your house is on fire, you immediately drop the dishes and go put out that fire. But if you're in that state always where there's always a fire, you end up just ignoring the dishes and the trash and the laundry indefinitely. And then that turns into a stinky mess of cockroaches and whatever. And that's what happens with chronic stress is that our bodies are constantly diverted from our maintenance tasks of digestion, reproductive hormones, and detox. So if we're chronically in this state of that this fire is consuming all our energy, we start to ignore all the maintenance tasks. And that's how your body is when you're in this survival state of constantly thinking about, the stress in your life or the stress that's coming up. Your body starts to prioritize survival and doesn't prioritize those maintenance things. So then that ends up showing up as inflammation in skin. And we know when you ignore your hormones or hormone balance long enough, it starts to turn into something, more. And that can be period problems. It can be hormonal acne. It can be a lot of different things. But that's how I see like stress can also be. And when I say stress, I often see a personality trait with a lot of people who struggle with persistent acne, which is a lot of perfectionism, high achievers. They put a lot of pressure on themselves. They're usually pretty critical of themselves or really just maybe striving like really hard, and that obviously can be a wonderful benefit in how you're advancing in your career or whatever it is, but it also turns in your subconsciously your body is not coming back to that baseline of rest and restore and that peace. So a lot of what we're starting with is welcoming peace, and that helps our digestion heal as we're working on our gut health, helps our body work on toxins better, and then it kind of filters down all the way to the skin, which is kind of the last domino. So a lot of people are just so frustrated because they keep trying to put up that acne domino, and then they're not aware, because I wasn't aware at first of how all these other components feed into that one symptom.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this stress component. I recently started to do a little bit of uncovering trauma in my life and realized that my acne and everything that I experienced when I started to experience some challenges with my health all rooted back to a particular time in my life when I went through something traumatic, which was kind of interesting to uncover, because in my mind, I was like, no, I just started to get all these issues. I don't know where they came from. And then when you dig a little bit deeper, you're like, oh, something traumatic happened right at the time that I started to develop this. You mentioned that when you started to develop acne in your 30s, which I think for a lot of people, they're like, what, in your 30s? Like, isn't that acne's over by then? Like, we shouldn't be dealing with it at that point. But, Yasmin went through the same thing. I went through the same thing, getting acne later in life. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your own journey with acne and why you became passionate about this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that stress or trauma, a lot of times people will say their acne started maybe in grad school, or sometimes people will say they've always had acne, and you learn a little bit more that maybe they had a very stressful childhood, or a lot of just unrest in their childhood home that they internalized as normal, but it really was putting their nervous system into this fight or flight mode at a very young age, and so they never really knew much differently. So it can look different in different people. For myself, I was a young mom. I had two toddlers, and I was pregnant with my third toddler, and my husband unexpectedly just left us, and I found myself to be a single pregnant mom with no income. I had been staying home with my kids, and I didn't have a career kind of established at that time. And so it was a huge shock, because it was pretty much like black 9 day, like it happened overnight. And so I was just in a shock, and I was like, I need to figure out a way to take care of myself. So that meant I went back to school to become a nurse practitioner. And so I was in night school trying to study with my little, 3 toddlers at home. And it was definitely something that I needed to do to make sure that I could survive and overcome my circumstances and make sure I was okay and my kids were provided for. But it was definitely like extremely stressful to just dig that deep and like get through something that not only was emotionally hard, but physically like hard on your body to be up all night with a newborn and then studying on like all of the things. So that led into a very beautiful journey to, I became a conventional nurse practitioner, and then now a holistic nurse practitioner, which I love. And I'm so blessed to be able to be in this space. But about, I would say, a year or two after kind of I got through the worst of it, I started noticing these health things come up. And I do find that there's sometimes a lag, usually like an 18-month lag between when we're most stressed and when you start to see symptoms. That's not true for everybody, but usually your body can compensate for a period of time. And then just like say with the house example, if you can ignore your trash for a certain amount of time before like the cockroaches start coming, but that's kind of how your body's compensating and you're getting through. And then you start to do this kind of crash and burn where your stress hormones are not able to compensate for all the stress going on. And they start to say, we need to protect ourselves. So it starts pulling back your stress hormones, and you start to develop more of these chronic some people, it can be like an autoimmunity thing. Some people, acne, the hormone balances, constipation, diarrhea, a lot of gut issues are related to that. So that's how my journey, I started getting acne after that time period. And I didn't put the two together. I just thought, well, now my gut health's messed up, and now I have acne. Now I have these, I had Raynaud's, which means your hands turn really, really cold. And that's a classic stress response. Your body's trying to preserve your blood flow to your vital organs away from your hands. And I just had all these things come up, and then I didn't put it all together until I started really digging into this research. And and the holistic approach to it. But I think a lot of people, if particularly when it comes up later in their 30s, I mean, also coming off birth control can also trigger acne when you're a little bit older. A lot of people come off birth control around their early 30s to try for a baby, and then boom, they have all this acne. So that's a little bit different of a scenario, but for sure that's how the stress component really does play into our physical health. And for so long, in conventional medicine, it's like very much divided. It's like you go to a psychiatrist for your, stress or anxiety, and you go to your other doctor for your gut health, another doctor for your hormone health. And there's not a lot of integration, and there's not a lot of whole person treatment. And so I just thought of like my thoughts and my stress as just kind of like floating somewhere out there. And I didn't see how it could physically manifest into where my body is diverting energy and blood flow and nutrients inside my body, because your brain is in charge of everything else. Your brain is in charge of your hormones. Your brain's in charge of everything, because it's picking up all this information around you and deciding how best to survive. That's really, survival is what we're programmed to do. So, but I love that question, and I think if more people could be aware, and that's where I always start, is awareness. Like, where is our stress? And sometimes it can look different. Maybe you're in denial. I see a lot of people who are high achievers and perfectionists. They don't feel stress because they're just like on this high of like always doing more, but their body is sending them signals that it's not feeling not optimally balanced. So yeah.
I can relate to that 100%. And stress is one of those things that it's really hard to confront it, because it's not easy. It's not a pill. It's not like, hey, I'll change my diet easy, no problem. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll exercise. But as soon as you mention stress to someone, they're like, A, I don't have it. B, like it feels too abstract to even wrap our heads around. So you went through this really traumatic situation, young mom, young kids. I only have one toddler. Can't imagine three, and then doing it on your own. That's a lot. And then these issues started to pop up. So you Raynaud's, acne, maybe some gut issues you were saying. So what happened next?
So at first, I always tell people that acne gets people's attention. So people could have like terrible IBS and they just can hide it, or they just don't confront it. And they might go to their doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, there's nothing to do for IBS, whatever. But acne gets people's attention. And I think it's because it's on your face and it confronts you every day when you look in the mirror. But that's got my attention. I was like, I don't want this like cystic acne anymore. And so of course I did all the topical route first. And then I was like, well, I'm a healthcare provider. I should be able to like figure this out. So I looked up the guidelines, like the dermatology, guidelines, which are supposed to be, the gold standard for how you treat someone with acne. And I was just remember thinking like, this just did not sit with me. I'm like, okay, so I'm supposed to go on retinol, and then I'm supposed to go on spironolactone. I'm supposed to go on birth control. I'm supposed to do all these things. And it just was like, well, why? Like, why is my skin doing this when before it didn't? And there was like no why. It was just like, well, you have oily skin and clogged pores. I'm like, what causes the oily skin and clogged pores? Like, why is my skin different? Because I could see my health was different than it was. And I think a lot of times people will write that off in puberty, whatever. But, I was in my early 30s and I wasn't like going through puberty. So all that to say, that started me on a journey of just searching and drawing from all of the different holistic practices, naturopathic, Ayurvedic, Chinese medicine, like functional medicine, and just sort of putting the pieces, as well as reading the actual, like spending hours and hours on PubMed, just like, there's some research on it. There is a good amount, but it's usually from other countries because they're investing in that knowledge. Whereas in the United States, we're just investing in like lasers and topicals and different things. Like there's more money to be had there. So all that to say, that just started a journey of like learning. And then I started applying it to myself, and I started changing my diet. And then again, I totally agree with you, Kaya, that stress is the hardest part. That was probably the last, like I can change my diet and I can take these pills or whatever, but really being honest with myself, how my nervous system was showing up in the world. That's what made it helped me get all the way there. I think you can get a certain amount of way there with the diet and with some really good quality supplements and knowing what maybe you're missing in your diet and all that. But to put it all together, you really have to be looking at your nervous system and supporting that as well. So that was just a process, and it happened over a year or so, a year and a half. And then, I mean, I guess it was probably 6 months so my skin was clear, but then I was still working on those digestive pieces and different things that I was like trying to get all the way there. But that just included a lot of, the nervous system stuff, which is the hardest thing for most people to work through.
Yeah, gosh, your story is so similar to mine and what you said just really resonates. Like you can deal with all these health issues. Like we started BIA and I started getting more in the health world, I used to have horrible periods and I just thought it was completely normal. But it really wasn't until the acne got so bad that I was like, this is truly affecting me from going out. It's affecting my confidence. It was like the final straw. And that's when Kea was so helpful in my journey. And I was seed cycling and, doing the basics, sleep, making sure I'm having 3 meals a day. And even looking back on my journey, I realized that I was not eating blood sugar balancing meals at all. And that not only affected my hormones, but also messed up my face. But maybe you can kind of talk about, I know we talk about blood sugar a lot on this podcast, but I still think it's important because especially when it comes to acne, at least for me personally, even to this day, now that my hormones are balanced, I eat something that's, maybe not the best meal, I immediately break out. So can you talk a little bit more about how blood sugar impacts acne?
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite topics. I haven't mentioned this yet, but yeah, blood sugar balance was huge for me. I didn't mention before, but I used to have a sugar tooth or, sugar cravings, just always be thinking about like, oh, when am I going to have that dessert after dinner? And what I do find with my one-on-one clients is so many of them are struggling with this blood sugar balance. And they just, we kind of just sweep it away like, oh, I have a sweet tooth. Like it's something your parents tell you when you're little, oh, you have a sweet tooth or I have a sweet tooth. And in my family, like we all had sweet tooth. So it's just like our family thing, and I didn't realize that it was possible to go through a day and not just be thinking about like that little sugar hit that you could get sometime in the day. And so when I learned about blood sugar balance and how it impacts insulin impacts our oil glands, and insulin is an anabolic hormone. So anabolic means it stimulates growth. So it's going to stimulate your skin cells, which are always rapidly, dividing to go even more into like hyper division and start to clog your pores. And then it stimulates your oil glands to increase in size and produce more oil. And so insulin is a big factor of that. That's why during puberty, kids or all teens become more insulin resistant, and that's to increase insulin in their circulation, which will stimulate a lot of growth. But then you see the classic oily skin and sebum and testosterone and all that is in there. But the more we can lower our insulin requirements and not require our body to pump out as much insulin. So the higher your glucose levels, the more starchy refined carbs and sugars, the more your body needs to create insulin to bring that blood sugar down. And so if we can stabilize that to just a normal like baseline level, that will really help our skin not be as oily or not be as inflamed, because insulin can contribute to inflammation as well. So yeah, so I it's a big thing that I go over with everybody, particularly teens, but everybody. And it's amazing how quickly, like within a few weeks, you start to feel different and you start to feel more balanced and you don't have as many cravings. And that's a really fun, like quick win you can get, is just focusing on that blood sugar. And it may not be enough for everybody to just clear the skin perfectly, but it is such an important foundational piece of everything else, all our hormone balance, and our hormones follow our insulin as well. So I'm so glad you guys are getting that word out more, because it's so important.
Oh my gosh, we talk about blood sugar like like all day and night, and protein. Those are like,
yes.
Change the name of the podcast, blood sugar and protein. But so you mentioned the blood sugar aspect, which was so huge for me. I honestly think that was like probably the biggest driver of my acne, in addition to the stress and trauma. It was probably the perfect storm in that situation. And what ended up happening at that time, now looking back on it for me, is I think I was eating a lot of products that had glyphosate in them. And so I'm curious about the connection between toxins and acne, but also our gut and acne. Somebody told me leaky gut, leaky skin one time. And so what is the connection between, let's talk about gut health first.
Yeah, yeah. So we know, I mean, there's some fascinating research that when they took like a healthy colon, a healthy person, and they injected something that created inflammation in their colon, they could measure that the inflammation in the skin was going up as well. So we had an inflamed colon, inflamed skin. Then they took away, that irritant, and then the colon inflammation went down, the skin inflammation went down. So there's this interesting connection between our skin and our gut. I think the research is still ongoing on really exploring the ins and outs of how that works. But we know that there's this visible thing, and so many people will notice, have gut issues and skin issues, whether that's eczema, psoriasis. I mean, it can come out in different ways as well. But so, the gut health, it's a whole topic in itself. But I do find that a lot of people do benefit from some gentle gut cleansing. Sometimes probiotics can make a big difference, sometimes not so much, but it's worth exploring that. And then there's also, so that's a whole area that I do a lot of like parasite cleansing with people, and that can make just kind of like reset it. So in that example of like the house example, I can keep going back to that, but like it's like bringing in a house cleaner and like getting you all back to zero and taking out the trash and laundry so everything looks nice and clean. But it also still comes back to that stress component of like, if you're not in the position to maintain that sparkly new home, like it's going to just creep back in on you before. And that's what sometimes people get frustrated, is that they'll do a gut cleanse, feel great. And then, 6 months down the road, they're back to where they started. And that's where you have to keep working on the nervous system and helping your body feel safe so it can prioritize those maintenance tasks of digestion. And also, our diet and finding out the things that are irritating. I mean, I always do elimination diets with people to look at like, is there something that we can find that is chronically inflaming your gut, and that also would inflame your skin too. So sometimes gluten, sometimes dairy, occasionally things like eggs or soy. Those are like the big ones. The other big one that no one likes to hear is caffeine. So that's caffeine is huge, both for the nervous system. So a lot of people will get a lot of anxiety and they don't even realize that it's related to their coffee. Like they'll stop coffee for a few weeks because I'm walking them through this elimination diet, and they'll be like, whoa, my anxiety just like went in half, or it's like so much less. And so sometimes people aren't even thinking like, oh, I'm just an anxious person, but really it's the daily caffeine, which is stimulating cortisol and stimulating their nervous system and that fight or flight response. So all that to say is the gut is a whole complex thing, but again, I still think there's a huge component of the nervous system tied into the gut, and then also like the physical foods and things and irritants that could be, you want to address from both sides. I think they complement each other well when we're healing the gut.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. I remember when I was really at the height of my acne, I was probably in my early 20s. I went to the dermatologist and I said, I think that there are certain foods that are triggering my acne. I think, for example, like when I eat high omega-6s, if I eat too many nuts, for some reason I get acne. And she looked at me like I was crazy. She looked at me like there's no possible way that you would get acne from nuts or something like that. And then we love an elimination diet. For example, with my husband, he was dealing with psoriasis for years. And we're like, what's causing this? We did an elimination diet, immediately figured out it was eggs. Now he's like, okay, I know eggs cause my psoriasis. I just have to lay off of them. So I think that's really interesting, because if anybody suspects that their skin issue is being triggered by food, an elimination diet is such a good way to kind of pinpoint what that food is. And that's not to say that they might need to get rid of it forever. They could potentially do some gut healing and be able to introduce that back. But don't ever let the dermatologist tell you, if you're listening to this, that there's no way a food could be causing your acne, because I think even the research shows that there is a link between, for example, dairy and acne. So if you have somebody you're working with who's really struggling with acne, is dairy something that you're just like, hey, for people with acne, like I recommend going off of it.
Yeah. So dairy, definitely, I tell people when you're actively healing acne, you do want to avoid dairy. So the example that I use is like, is running bad for you? Well, it depends on who you are. If you have a broken leg, running is bad for you. If you are a healthy person, and you can probably run, and also maybe for a healthy person, there's a quantity thing. Like you can run 3 miles or you can run 20 miles. Like there could be different variations. So with elimination diets, unless you're, celiac, or you find something that's like really, you can't eat it ever again. With dairy particularly, I tell people, let's avoid it for a few months while we're initially healing. That's like letting that broken leg heal. And then you can, play around with how much dairy you can tolerate. So maybe you tolerate a serving here and there. Maybe you tolerate a couple times a week, maybe once a day. Like it depends on the person. I think for me, dairy was a big trigger initially, but it seems like now it's not a trigger for me anymore. So I think that's just like letting, and that's the other thing. And people will often go off dairy for like a week or two, and like, oh, I didn't see a difference, or even just a month, maybe they didn't see a difference. So you have to really give it at least, I tell people at least 4 to 6 weeks, but ideally for dairy, it'll be a little longer to give your body that break to really heal, get those hormones. And you guys know hormone balance takes, some time, 3-4 months at minimum. And so you want to give your body a chance to heal before we start adding that trigger back in. And so dairy is one of the things that people, and some people will notice like their digestion is so much better without dairy. Sometimes there's different forms of dairy you can tolerate, and sometimes not. Sometimes goat dairy or A2 dairy. Like, so there's a whole process, and there's not an easy way or easy test to figure that out. You really have to just go through that journey of seeing how your body responds.
So I'm curious for anybody who's listening to this who is really, because I remember when I was like in the depths of my acne and feeling like, when is this going to end? And it interfering with my life, interfering with my ability to socialize and be myself in the world. And I just have so much sympathy for that person and anyone who's like in the thick of it. So if there's anyone who's listening who's like, I feel completely lost with my acne, I don't know what the heck to do, but I know that I just want to get out of this phase of my life, what would be your top level recommendations?
Oh my goodness. And I do empathize with that as well, because I don't think acne almost doesn't get taken seriously enough, because it's not like, quote, life threatening. And you don't really understand how much it kind of takes over your day, your thoughts. Like every morning you're like looking at your face and it's like this dark cloud every time you feel out of control, because it's like something where you want to feel like you're doing everything right, but it's just like still coming up. So it's definitely really hard. And I think that's honestly one of the first places to start, is to just take a step back and to give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of empathy and compassion to yourself, because almost the thing that's counterproductive in that healing journey when you're really trying to heal those root causes is to have all this negative energy that's like pouring out on yourself, from yourself, that can kind of put you at a harder place to heal, because you're just like so obsessed with it. And I also say, like, acne doesn't respond well to deadlines. Some people will be like, I have my wedding in 2 months, I need to have clear skin, and like they want a quick fix. And that's just like not the way that acne is going to heal naturally. So, but as far as how do you get started on that journey? So first of all, there are a few little tips that I can give you as like a quick start, as terms, it's not necessarily root cause, but it is something that will help get some relief of the inflammation. So you can always do some ice rolling. If you have a lot of inflamed cystic acne, start the morning and night with some ice rolling. You can do some spot treatments. I personally love like a little tea tree oil, but other people might have more sensitive skin, might not do well with that. But tea tree oil, or there's a product called Clear Skin Elixir, which is like, that's from Averaglow, but that's like a mask, like a clay mask that helps to reduce inflammation. Some people, we even do a little bit of benzoyl peroxide. I'm not a huge fan of benzoyl peroxide like long term, but sometimes it can just give you a little bit of relief if you have like a big cyst and you're like, I have an event tomorrow or whatever, and you're just trying to get some relief. So there's some things you can do with that. And other things you can do is kind of temporary, like testosterone. It's going to lower testosterone. So things like spearmint tea, even licorice root. If you do not have any trouble with your blood pressure, licorice root tea is something good. Nettle leaf, dandelion tea, these herbs will all be helpful in helping your body. Or zinc supplement can be helpful for some people. It kind of blocks or helps your body break down testosterone. It's not going to stop that testosterone from being made if you're having these, again, upstream like blood sugar imbalances, gut issues, but it's going to help lower that initial sort of testosterone that's triggering a lot of like cystic hormonal type acne. And honestly, I do love seed cycling. Actually, I just put together this whole presentation on coming off of birth control and preventing that testosterone rebound and getting your cycles back. And I did put on all my slides, like, consider seed cycling, particularly if you have your regular periods or you're trying to reestablish a good hormone balance. So those are some kind of quick action tips. And I tell people to start those while they start that deeper healing, which is going into the elimination diets, looking into how is my gut health. Like, you know, you could have inflammation in your gut and not have overt gut symptoms, like overt, like terrible IBS or something like that. So taking a look at some of those factors, your periods are a really great like report card for yourself. Like, how are you getting through your monthly periods? If you're having regular periods, what is that showing you about your health? There's some really great books more focused right on periods and how you can learn more about your body through your symptoms. So yes, so the first places that I would start initially would be looking at the elimination diet and starting that and giving yourself enough time on it to see which things are triggers, and then also the blood sugar balance. And the blood sugar balance is something that does respond in a few weeks. You'll start to notice a difference, and that can really calm down inflammation, but also the oiliness if you have oily skin. And honestly, people just feel a lot better as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think at that moment in my life, I was really looking for a roadmap. And so if anybody's listening and they want to go deeper, do you have a program? Can people work with you? What's the best way to get involved?
Yes. So I have 2 courses that are exactly that roadmap. And I've put this together after working with hundreds of people one-on-one, which is giving me that chance to walk with people through that journey, which can be emotional, can be, hard to go through that journey when you are like so consumed with your skin and wanting it to be better like yesterday. So I've worked with so many people one-on-one. I put the steps together into the 5-step clear skin method. And I have 2 courses. One is more aimed at adult acne. So if you're maybe in your later 20s or your 30s and you're struggling with this, either your teen acne hasn't gone away or you're getting new acne, or maybe you've come off birth control after many years and now you're getting this rebound acne. The Clear Skin Code is my course for adult acne. And I also have a course for teens, and usually it's like teens and parents who are going through it together. It's called the Teen Acne Academy. And so that's focused a little bit more on the issues that are unique in puberty and tailored to a more teen parent working through this together. So those are my 2 main ways that you can get a roadmap for walking through this. And then, what the nice thing is when you sign up and you have lifetime access to it, so you can always go back, rewatch videos. There's a lot of handouts and worksheets and things to help you learn more about your body through what I call symptom clusters, is learning what symptoms your body's manifesting and seeing what that points to as far as root causes. And I find that to be very effective. You don't necessarily, for most people, don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money on like crazy testing. If for some advanced cases that could be helpful, but most people can get a really, really far along in their healing journey without having to spend thousands of dollars on testing. And so that's another common question people ask me. Well, my hormones are out of whack. I need to get testing. And you don't always need to, because the steps that we're doing to promote healing really do it balances the body so holistically that things are going to fall into place. Your body wants to be in that balance and homeostasis. We don't need to just be like taking, titrating all these medication or herbs to get there. Our body's going to naturally find that balance when we support and remove the things that's holding it back.
Absolutely. I love that. I love, first of all, that the teen one is for teens and parents, because it can feel so isolating when you're a kid. And it almost has to be like, this is a family approach. Like, how can we all get involved to live a healthier lifestyle. And then also B, exactly what you said, that sometimes we don't need a lot of fancy testing. Sometimes we just need to do the basics. And I think a lot of times people will take a step back. It's like, be honest with yourself. Are you doing the basics? And then if you really truly are, and then you need more advanced testing or to work with someone, then go for it. So my last and final question is like kind of a fun question that we do with all of our experts that we got from TikTok. It's, what are 3 things now as a nurse practitioner, knowing everything that you know about skin health, that you would never do to your body?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so 3 things that I would never do to myself. I think I've come on such a journey, as we all have, as we learn better, or we learn more, we do better. I think number 1, I've really taken away that mindset. I grew up as, as an athlete. I was a, all-American athlete, and it was always about pushing your body to the limit, and like kind of like the no pain, no gain. And I really have seen now how we can be optimally healthy and even look our best without having to push your body, like exercise wise, to like these high extremes, and how that can also be more beneficial for women to not be like high intensity exercising all the time. So I kind of have given myself that permission to not kill my body in the gym anymore. And I actually find I just enjoy, I do the exercise that I really enjoy. I still love movement. I still love that, but I just don't push myself that hard anymore, to the point of being in pain. I also think one of the big things is that I would never do or use is things like nonstick cookware with like all the like scratches in it. I think there's so much out there pointing to how many of these chemicals can get in our bodies and disrupt important hormonal disruptions, but also just toxicity in general. So looking around your environment and finding things that like nonstick or fragrances in our laundry, anything that you're putting on your body on a daily basis or being around on a daily basis, take a look at that and try to do like a clean sweep. And I think that's really important for our long-term health, but also our children too, who are growing up around that a lot. And then lastly, I think just having a better understanding of blood sugar and sugar in general, I feel so much better that I never want to go back to just like eating a whole big bowl, like a sundae of ice cream. Like, even though I used to think that was like so pleasurable, and like I would look forward to just like shoving like cookie dough or something in my mouth, I just feel so much better not being controlled by that. And now it's been long enough where I can feel like so much worse when I do indulge in something really sugary, that it's just a very freeing feeling. And I hope I listen to my body. And if I start having more sugar cravings, and that's like when I know I need to like just adjust some things. But I just hope for everybody that they can learn how to feel that good in their own body, that they're not driven by sugar cravings.
Totally. I love that, because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, you're not like giving yourself those like pleasure foods. And it's not even about that. Somebody said, sometimes we don't know how bad we feel until we feel good.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you come out on the other side and you're like, wow, this is how great I can feel without having those certain things, like you don't want to let go of that feeling. So I can definitely resonate with that. And thanks so much for joining us today. This is a topic that's so dear to my heart, and I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it. So thanks for being on, Kristin.
Absolutely. I loved it.